Setting boundaries is a way to guard your heart and prioritize what God has called you to do. Grace and peace, everyone. Welcome or welcome back to Evolving with Brooke. I'm your virtual big sister, and this is a space for real talk, real faith, and real encouragement as we grow into the women that God has created us to be. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe because I'd love to hear from you, and the community of Evolvers would as well. And don't forget to share with a loved one if you know that they need some encouragement today. So without further ado, let's dive on in and let's evolve together. If you're new here, I'm Brooke. Hey girl, hey. And I'm super glad that you're joining me today because today we are tackling a topic that's very crucial for a healthy, balanced, and faith-filled life, which is boundaries. Yes. Setting boundaries can be tough, especially when you want to honor God, care for others, and still just make time for yourself. But here's the truth. Boundaries aren't selfish, they're biblical. So stick with me as we explore what it means to set healthy boundaries while honoring God and those around us. Let's start with this. What exactly are healthy boundaries? Well, boundaries are the limits that we set to protect our emotional, our physical, and spiritual well-being. They help us define what isn't okay in a relationship or just time and energy. So scripture shows us that God himself sets boundaries. In Genesis, he created the world and established limits between light and darkness and land and sea. So Jesus also modeled boundaries in his ministry because he often withdrew from crowds to pray, according to Luke 5:16. And he didn't hesitate to say no when necessary. A lot of us need to say no. Proverbs 4:23 says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything that you do flows from it. So setting boundaries is a way to guard your heart and prioritize what God has called you to do. So why do we need boundaries? One is to protect our time and energy. Ephesians chapter 5 verse 15 through 16 reminds us to be very careful then how we live, not as unwise but wise, making the most of every opportunity. So when we say yes to everything, we risk burnout and neglecting the things that God has specifically called us to. Number 2 is to build healthy relationships. Boundaries protect resentment. They help us communicate our needs and expectations clearly, which leads to healthier and more respectable relationships. And then number 3 is to honor God's purpose for our lives. So when we overcommit and allow others to cross our boundaries, we might unintentionally miss out on the work that God has for us. Boundaries help us stay aligned with his will. How do you know if you need to set boundaries? You will typically feel consistently drained. So if you always are exhausted, it might be because you're overextending yourself. You struggle to say no. People pleasing often leads to broken boundaries. You feel resentful. Resentment is like a red flag that someone has crossed the line and you haven't addressed it yet. You're losing focus on God. If your commitments or relationships pull you away from God, it's time to reevaluate. Any of these sound familiar? Don't worry, you're not alone. Many of us struggle with boundaries, but with God's guidance, we can create healthy boundaries. We can create healthy ones. Now, let's talk about how to set boundaries in a way that honors both God and others. Is just obvious. Seeking God's wisdom. Start with prayer. Ask God how to show you where you need boundaries set and to give you courage to enforce them. According to James 1:5 promises, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Identify your priorities. So what has God called you to focus on in this season? Whether it's your family, whether it's your career, whether it's your ministry or your health, let these priorities guide your boundaries. Communicate clearly and lovely. When you set boundaries, I use statements to express your needs. For example, I need time to rest, so I won't be able to commit to this situation that you want me to at this moment. Ephesians 4:15 reminds us to speak the truth in love. Be consistent. Consistency is key. If you set a boundary but don't stick to it, others won't take it seriously. and they'll just run all over you. So remember, enforcing boundaries isn't about being mean. It's about being faithful to what God has asked for you. Trust God with the outcome. Sometimes setting boundaries might upset others, and that's okay. Galatians 1:10 says, am I trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would have not been a servant of Christ. So our goal is to honor God, not people please. So let's address one of the biggest challenges: fear. Fear of rejection, fear of judgment, or conflict often keeps us from setting boundaries. But here's the truth. When we honor God with our boundaries, He strengthens us and He brings peace. Isaiah 41:10 says, do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. Lean into His promises and trust that He will guide you even when it's hard. And to make this a little bit more practical, here are a few more examples of healthy boundaries. Time. Setting aside one time out of the day to worship God and listen to Him. Relationships. Limiting time for people to drain you emotionally. Social media. Turning off notifications or setting limits on screen time to protect your mental health. Remember, boundaries are all about creating space for what matters most to you. They're not walls to shut people out. They're just gates to let the right things in. So setting boundaries is an act of love for yourself, for others, and even for God. It allows you to live with intention, steward your time well, and focus on what truly matters. If this message resonated with you, please let me know in the comments what is one boundary that you need to set in your life today. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more faith-filled inspiration. In the community of Evolvers, it's your girl Evolving with Brooke signing out. See you tomorrow.